How's it going, folks? Today, we're diving into a bit of an unusual but super important topic, lab rats. Yep, those little mice we always hear about in scientific research and medical experiments. Think about it. Every new drug, every scientific trial, the first thing they turn to is rats. Why, though? Why rats specifically? Couldn't they use cats, dogs, or even frogs? And have these rats actually help save human lives from diseases like diabetes, Alzheimer's, or cancer? Also, with all this lab use, could it affect their numbers in the wild and maybe even lead to extinction? Let's tackle these questions one by one in our simple, straightforward way. Why rats specifically? First off, let's get one thing straight. The choice of rats for experiments isn't random, nor is it just because they're cheap. Nope, rats have some unique traits that make them the top pick for scientists and researchers worldwide. So what's the deal? Let's break it down. Rats are tiny, so they don't take up much space in labs. Imagine if they used bigger animals like dogs or even rabbits. The lab would turn into a zoo, and it'd be a nightmare to manage. But rats? Easy peasy. You can keep large numbers of them in small cages, and the cost of raising them is super low. On top of that, rats adapt to any environment crazy fast. Whether you're in a lab in Egypt, the US, or Japan, a rat will settle in and do its thing without complaining. Unlike other animals that might be picky or need specific conditions, rats are chill. And here's the kicker. Rats reproduce at an insane rate. In just a few months, you can have new generations of rats ready for experiments. This means they're always available in large numbers, which is a huge plus for scientists running large-scale studies. Okay, but don't rabbits breed fast too? Sure, rabbits do multiply quickly, and their size is reasonable, not too big like dogs or too small like insects. But it's not just about size and reproduction. There are way more important reasons why rats take the lead. One big one is their short lifespan. A rat typically lives for about 2 to 3 years, max. Why is that useful? A short lifespan lets scientists study the effects of drugs or experiments across multiple generations in a short time. Picture this. You test a drug on a rat. Then a few months later, you see its effects on its offspring, and a few months after that, on its grandkids. This gives you a solid idea of how the drug works long-term, both on the rat's body and its descendant. Similarity to humans. Now, let's get to the most important point. This might blow your mind. Rats' genes are incredibly similar to human genes. The biological and physiological processes in a rat's body are very close to those in a human's. If a rat gets a certain disease, the symptoms it shows are often similar to what humans experience. That's why when scientists test a drug on rats, they know the results will likely be close to what could happen in humans. It gets even wilder. Scientists can now tweak rats' genes to make them even more similar to humans, especially for genes linked to diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, or diabetes. They basically turn the rat into a mini-human model and study the effects of drugs or diseases with incredible precision. Imagine a rat genetically modified to have cancer-causing genes like those in humans, and they test a new treatment on it. If the treatment works on the rat, there's a good chance it'll work on humans too. Rats also share other traits with humans, like behaviors and genetic characteristics. For example, if you want to study a drug's effect on the nervous system or behavior, rats are perfect because their reactions often mirror human ones. This makes them ideal for researching diseases like Alzheimer's or even addiction.
Rat anatomy. Another key point, rats are tiny, so dissecting them is straightforward for doctors and researchers. At the same time, their internal systems, like the digestive, respiratory, and circulatory systems, are remarkably similar to humans. If you want to study the human digestive system, you can start with a rat and understand about 90% of it. Plus, tracking a drug's effects in a rat's body is way easier than in a human's because their systems are smaller and simpler. Honestly, researchers know rats inside out, like they've got a full manual on them. Every detail, from their genes to their organs, is thoroughly studied. So why bother looking for another animal and starting from scratch when you've got a reliable option like rats? It's like having a complete catalog for a rat's body. Why reinvent the wheel?
Rats' contributions to science. So, have rats actually helped treat diseases? Absolutely, folks. Rats have played a massive role in developing the drugs we use today. Medications for high blood pressure, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease, AIDS, and even addiction treatment. All were tested on rats before reaching humans. Even healthy diets and nutrition plans, a big chunk of those are based on lab experiments with rats. Let's look at some examples. In diabetes research, rats were used to understand how insulin works in the body and how to control blood sugar levels. In cancer studies, genetically modified rats help scientists figure out how cancer cells multiply and how to stop them. For Alzheimer's, rats helped researchers understand how the brain is affected by the disease and test new drugs that could slow its progression. Rats have also been key in heart disease research, including heart attacks, as well as respiratory conditions like asthma. Even in addiction studies, anti-addiction drugs are tested on rats to see how they affect the brain and behavior. The list goes on. Rats have contributed to treatments for dozens of conditions, from muscular dystrophy to spinal cord injuries. But it's not all rosy, folks. Some people object to using rats in experiments, and they've got valid reasons. For one, rats often face harsh conditions in labs. They might be deprived of food, intentionally injured or burned, or even made to develop diseases like cancer so scientists can study them. Many rats die during or after experiments, either from the tests themselves or because they're euthanized when the study's done. There's also another objection. Experiments on rats aren't always 100% reliable. Why? Because no matter how similar a rat's body is to a human's, it's not an exact match. There are old examples, like a drug from the 1950s that worked great on rats, but caused birth defects in over 100,000 children when used by humans. Another case involved a heart drug that succeeded in animals, but led to heart attacks in over 27,000 people. That said, these cases are exceptions, and the successes from rat-based research far outweigh the failures. That's why scientists are working on alternatives to using rats and animals in general. Like what? First up, cell cultures in labs. They take human or animal cells without harming anyone, grow them in a lab environment, and test drugs directly on them. These cells act like they're in a living body, giving accurate results without needing animals. Another option is computer simulations. Modern tech can mimic how drugs or toxins affect the human body using smart software. Instead of testing a drug on a rat, you run a digital simulation and see the results on a screen. This method's used a lot in industries like cosmetics, for products like creams and soaps. Finally, there's something called biochips, materials that speed up experiments and boost result accuracy in less time. The goal of all these alternatives is to move away from animal testing entirely, protecting nature and wild animals.
Wrapping it up. At the end of the day, folks, rats aren't just tiny critters we use in labs. They've played a huge role in saving human lives by helping develop drugs and treatments. Without rats, many of the medications we rely on today wouldn't exist. But at the same time, we need to think about more humane alternatives to keep nature in balance and reduce harm to animals. If you made it this far, you're awesome. Drop a like or a comment if you've got any burning questions, and we'll get back to you ASAP. Don't forget, if you want to know more about science or experiments, leave it in the comments and we'll hook you up. Peace out and catch you next time with another mind-boggling question.